It's 5 a.m. and Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome, steps out of his tent located on a Roman military base, reminding himself, at dawn, I have to go to work as a human being. There was absolutely no room for laziness, and the day had to get started one way or the next. Whether he wanted to or not, he had a job to do. A day in the life of a Roman emperor was nothing like what you or I do on a daily basis. It would have been full of intense study, war, and honestly, just a ton of chaos. Chaos that Marcus Aurelius would have always had to remain calm under. His day would have started bright and early at 5 a.m., writing his now famous book, Meditations. Marcus Aurelius at this time, though, just intended Meditations to be a personal journal to write down his thoughts in. He was not only a Roman emperor, but a philosopher at heart and a very wise one. So he did a fair amount of journaling, and that journal just so happened to later on be discovered and published. From 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. starting out his day, he would have tried to keep it as calm as he possibly could, reading philosophy, writing his own thoughts down, and meditating. Aurelius, running the entire Roman Empire at the time, knew that the day ahead of him was always going to demand a lot of energy, so he needed to start it out right. It wasn't exactly an exciting morning, but it was an effective routine. He didn't dunk his face in Saratoga water and rub a banana peel on it, but he made sure that his mind was right before he jumped into any of his work for the day. By 7 a.m., it would have been time to hop into a meeting with the Roman Empire's military advisors. Marcus Aurelius was heavily involved in leading the military and multiple wars during his time as emperor. This was no doubt the most important task of his day, making sense why it was so early on. If he messed up badly on military strategy, the entire empire might just fall. Marcus Aurelius approached everything with excellence and wasn't one to let anything slip through the cracks. As a Roman emperor, if you let things slip through the cracks, to say the very least, it wouldn't have been good. There was likely more pressure on an emperor of Rome than the president of the USA in our modern day. This was a very intense job that required a lot from Aurelius, so in Meditations, he wrote, "What is your art? Being good." Aurelius knew that excellence and just being good at what he did, as simple as it may sound, was the most important part of his life. Being good at what you do, regardless of what it is, brings every other result you could possibly dream of. But interestingly enough, as we'll get to later in the video, Aurelius didn't actually desire too much. Once his famous journal, now known as Meditations, was discovered, people realized just how stoic he was. Aurelius was purely focused on the mission ahead of him. He was willing to lay aside all other passions and desires to stay dedicated. The morning military meeting likely brought a ton of new issues and stressors that needed to be solved. And if it was anybody else, it could have easily thrown off their day, but not Aurelius. He stayed on track and went to the next task. At 8 a.m., it was time to deal with petitions from citizens or officials. This part of the day was purely full of stress and chaos. Constant complaints, problems to solve, and citizens who wanted to hurl bricks at his head. Basically, a glorified HR job. Luckily, Aurelius was able to remain strong in these kind of situations, writing, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." He made sure that his entire being and all desires were placed internally, completely detached emotionally from the chaos of the world. He would deal with citizens' complaints as best as he could and continue moving through the day like nothing happened. Coming up to 9 a.m., it was time for Aurelius to attend some Senate sessions. Once again, you start to see that the day of a Roman emperor isn't exactly the most exciting job. It required somebody who was focused and determined no matter how they felt. A big part of Aurelius' mindset that would have been presented during these Senate sessions was the idea of doing things for the greater good of society. What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee. This is another reason Aurelius was a great emperor. He wasn't focused just on himself, but he actually wanted to build Rome into something greater. He wanted to make Rome great again. And to do that, he knew he had to support the citizens and not just make himself rich. The Senate sessions, though, likely were more of a boring part of his day, especially compared to what came up at 10 a.m. Because 10 a.m. would have brought along some demanding military strategy. Being the emperor, he would have been above everybody in the military and entirely in charge of their course of action. Stoicism, when it comes to military strategy, was an absolute necessity for Aurelius. One poorly made decision when emotional could have cost the Roman Empire thousands of lives or resulted in an entire collapse. Starting the day off how he did, priming his mind with meditation, reading, learning, and writing, is the only way that he could have had as perfect of strategy as he did. Because Marcus Aurelius, during his time as emperor, actually never lost a single war. Were there setbacks? Well, of course. The winter of 171 CE cost him 2 entire Roman legions, but because of his ability to remain calm under pressure, the war ultimately ended in Roman victory. So this strategy time was probably the most important part of his day. At 11 a.m., if he was near the camps, he would have gone and checked in with the soldiers. It was good for the emperor to constantly show his face around the empire, making sure that not only the people stayed in line, but also just to make sure things were running as they should. Another principle that Aurelius wrote about in his journal was, "You should consider that glory is nothing." Touring around the soldier camps and making sure everything was good to go, Aurelius likely shared bits of his philosophy like this with the soldiers. Glory was nothing, there was a job to do, and that was that. Aurelius aimed to not take pride in his work, but just to do a great job for the sake of doing a great job. And as emperor, the goal would be to share your philosophy and get your soldiers on the same page as you. Interestingly, for as much as Marcus Aurelius wrote and journaled, his days would have been pretty packed. And there was a good reason for this. Don't live as if you had 10,000 years. We need a constant reminder that we only have 100 years on Earth, if we're lucky, and likely less. Marcus himself only lived to be 58 years old, but truly, he accomplished more in his life than most people could ever dream of. In this same spirit, when it came to noon, he likely had a small meal. He didn't want to overindulge in pleasures, so he would get back to work immediately. Starting off the afternoon, at 1 p.m., Marcus went around the empire to check in on new construction sites and new projects. As we saw at the start of the day though, Marcus prioritized his health. He knew that if he was too tired or his mind was off track, nothing would be done as well as it could have been. So coming up now to hour 8 of being awake, Marcus would have probably hit the sack for a little midday nap. This though, just like his meals, was not overindulgent in the slightest. He rested for 30 or 40 minutes and quickly got back up, ready to tackle the rest of the day. 3 p.m. brought along a super important part of Marcus Aurelius' day as emperor. Funny enough, this super important part of the day had basically nothing to do with his job as emperor. This time was devoted to tutoring his son Commodus, which sadly didn't go exactly as planned. Marcus spent time each day tutoring his son, hoping to raise him into a virtuous and wise ruler as he was. But as history shows, Commodus didn't exactly follow this virtuous path. He grew up to be self-indulgent, egotistical, and brutal, showing really it has to be a choice that you yourself make to be virtuous, and nobody else can make you do it. Aurelius tried his very best, but ultimately failed. Still, he dedicated this time in the afternoon to what really mattered to him, his son. We see constantly during the day of Marcus Aurelius that no time is wasted. There's no idle activity and everything has a purpose. As written in Meditations though, soon you will have forgotten all things. Soon all things will have forgotten you. And through this, we learn something really interesting about his philosophy. He knew that time was limited and he constantly reminded himself of that simple fact. But clearly it pushed him to make each day count. Coming up to 4 p.m., he would have had some chill time before more emperor duties were calling his name. He spent his free time absolutely devouring more philosophy and writing in his journal. His mind was full of new ideas that he just had to write down. This time in his day was essential to say the very least, and thanks to it, we now have Meditations. Aurelius would have also written lots of letters to his friends and his co-workers, if you can call them that in the Roman Empire. He made sure to stay in contact and he loved sharing his ideas. By 7 p.m., you could expect some news from the military. Good or bad, it wouldn't affect Marcus Aurelius' mind. Once again, his stoicism being the staple of who he was as an emperor. When jarred, don't let your mind leap to what's bad. Stick with the first impression. Oftentimes, if you were hit with some terrible military news, it would be easy to start overthinking and even panicking. But Aurelius made sure he never did either of those. He tried to approach everything thoughtfully and with intention. After some more work with the military, he would have finally been able to wind down for the day, eating a light supper and taking a nice warm bath. His day, every day, would have been packed with managing citizens, managing the military, and the empire as a whole. On top of this, he managed to set aside time for what mattered most to him: his philosophy, learning, and of course, mentoring. It would have been a long day though, and around 9 or 10 p.m., he would pass out, ready to do it all again the next morning. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, drop a sub to the channel, and I will see you all next time.